everyone, let's talk about how much Bitcoin do you need to have before it makes sense to get a Bitkey, which is a hardware device that secures your Bitcoin. So it's actually a surprisingly difficult question, but I want to give you a couple ways to think about it that might be helpful. So the first way to think about it is just a wallet. The question is, how much money would you keep in a wallet before you got a bank account? Now, again, the correlation's not exact because most people would only keep maybe a couple $100s in their wallet and the rest in a bank account with a debit card and all that. So obviously it doesn't scale, the same way, but it's the same sort of concept. So if you had a bunch of US dollars, if you were with somebody and they were paying for a cup of coffee and they opened a duffel bag that was just stacked to the brim with $100 bills and, peeled one off to pay for a cup of coffee, you would think, that's not wise. Why are you walking around with a duffel bag full of $100 bills? That should be in a bank account. So the similar thing here, whether you think about it as a wallet versus a bank account, whether you think about it as sort of how much money would you ever carry around in your car or in a backpack or in a duffel bag before you went and put it in the bank or something like that, that is the sort of general thought process to think about as far as, when you need a Bitkey. Another good example would be a safe. Like if you had, family jewels that were worth, $5,000 or $10,000, the question is, how valuable would those jewels need to be in order to make sense to buy a safe? Obviously, if you have $10,000 of family jewels, you would not buy a $10,000 safe because the security would cost the same as the jewels themselves, which makes zero sense. So there's some ratio there where it makes sense to get a Bitkey as opposed to just keep Bitcoin on Coinbase. So let's look at a couple numbers. One is that the cost of Bitkey is about $150, 150. So if you have something that costs $150, that is about 1.5% of $10,000. So one way to think about it is to say, okay, if you have more than $10,000 of Bitcoin, then it costs, 1.5% of that to buy a $150 device, which also means you would not buy a Bitkey if you only have $1,500 because otherwise you're spending literally 10% of your Bitcoin securing your Bitcoin, which is in my opinion, an expense that is much too high. So it feels like to me that the tipping point is probably somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. That is at $5,000, $150 is 3% of the total. And at $10,000, it's 1.5% of the total. So it feels like maybe somewhere in there between $5,000 and $10,000, it starts to make sense about securing your Bitcoin more securely than just leaving it on a centralized exchange. But again, everybody's different. There's people that have small amounts of Bitcoin who feel very, very, very strongly that they want it in their control and as secure as conceivably possible. There's also other people who have relatively large amounts of Bitcoin that are completely comfortable just leaving it on Coinbase. In all scenarios, well, not in all scenarios, the biggest risk with Bitcoin on Coinbase is hackers and scammers. Hackers and scammers are everywhere. They are constantly trying to hack financial accounts. I mean, people are just regularly tell me they're getting robocalled by people claiming to be from Wells Fargo Bank or from Coinbase technical support or from Google. And people are getting blasted with text messages saying that a login attempt was attempted from Toronto, Canada. And if it was not them, they need to call this number to secure their account. And of course, there's a hacker or a scammer on the other end who is going to tell them that they're securing their account, but really is going to get their login information so that they can clean out their account. So they'll tell them their account's been compromised. They need to send all of their Bitcoin to a new, more secure account. Of course, that is the account of a hacker or a scammer. So the best thing Bitkey does for you, not only does it put your Bitcoin completely within your control, a huge benefit of what it does for you is it insulates your Bitcoin. It secures it from hackers and scammers because, again, there's just no way they can't access your account the way they can if it's on Coinbase. If they get your password and your two-factor authentication to log in, it's just you can just sidestep all of that with Bitkey. So there's not an exact number, but the right way to think about how much Bitcoin it makes sense to have before it should be more secure than just leaving it on exchange is how much is that $150 cost as compared to the total amount of Bitcoin you would secure. I usually recommend people secure between 70% and 90% of their Bitcoin on Bitkey. And obviously you've got to leave some Bitcoin on Coinbase if you want to use the Coinbase debit card, because that's where it pulls from. And you don't want to be moving it back and forth a bunch, because at some point when you sell Bitcoin, you've got to keep up with taxes, and the fewer sort of back and forth movements between different places Bitcoin is, the easier it is to keep up with. Now, it is not a taxable event when you move your Bitcoin around, but at some point, if you sell it, you do have to keep up with how much gain you had on that Bitcoin. And it's just easier if there's fewer total moving transactions back and forth between Bitkey and Coinbase. One other consideration here is just that even though Coinbase is the most reputable cryptocurrency company in the world, and I think the probability that they get hacked or that something bad happens with Coinbase is extremely, extremely, extremely low, it's also not zero. It's never zero. It's not zero with JP Morgan. It's not zero with Wells Fargo. It's not zero with, Citibank. So, I'll tell you, back in 2014, before Mt. Gox, MT Gox blew up, everybody was saying there's no possible way that the cryptocurrency exchange that has 85% of the world's volume, there's no way something bad could happen to an exchange that is that important to Bitcoin, which was MT Gox, Mt. Gox. And it did. They got hacked in a major, major, major way. And that, just an epic hack that cleaned out something like 850,000 Bitcoin. It was like a ridiculously large hack in the early days. And that resulted in the bankruptcy of FTX and the loss of a huge amount of Bitcoin by the people who had it on FTX. So obviously, if something like Bitkey had existed back then, it would have saved them from that. Now, fast forward to 2022, and you've got FTX. FTX was an exchange. It was a major player. It was either the, probably second largest trading platform for cryptocurrencies in the world, behind maybe Binance. But anyway, regardless, it was in the top three. And people back then in 2022 were saying, well, the good thing about FTX is it's not like Mt. Gox. We know what Mt. Gox looked like when it blew up in 2014, but this is not Mt. Gox. This is FTX, the amazing FTX that is backed by all the Silicon Valley, venture capital firms. And this is the super legit FTX. Well, obviously FTX was a fraud. Sam Bankman-Fried was a fraud. And they So they stole a bunch of people's money. So as a result of that, a bunch of people lost money. So again, incoming calls. Once again, super important that you think about where your Bitcoin is held. And in the case of so all of that could have been avoided if it was in Bitkey, and they would not have lost their money the way they did on FTX. So fast forward to today, the common sense thing to do is just self-custody as much of your Bitcoin as you can. But again, whether, it depends on your technical appetite for just things that involve a little bit of extra technical expertise. It's super simple to set up Bitkey. I've shown video after video of how simple it is. But again, it's one extra little thing, and it depends on whether you have an appetite for that one extra little thing. But it does make your Bitcoin infinitely more secure. It puts it 100% in your control. And for the first time, you will truly be your own bank. And being your own bank is just really cool. It's really powerful. It's really amazing. So hope all that helps. Thank you, everyone.